Welcome to the Proud Psychologist podcast, where we look at all things mental health. Brought to you by me, Carol, an LGBTQ coaching psychologist. Hello everyone. Today we're going to be looking at the Disney Pixar film Coco to see what mental health gems it contains. I've noticed that sitting down to analyse both Turning Red and now Coco has resulted in me becoming a big fan of them both, where my previous opinion was just, yeah, it's a good film but nothing to write home about. This change in opinion may be because I'm a psychology and mental health geek, which I know is totally unsurprising. But I would like to think it's really because of a greater appreciation from peeling back the layers and seeing the films in a fresh light. I will be diversifying the types of films I base episodes on in the future, since Disney Pixar are not the only ones producing films suitable for this podcast. It's an exciting prospect, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it turns out. Now, before we continue, there will be spoilers in this, so if you haven't seen the film and would like to before listening, now is a good time to stop. Coco is a film about a boy called Miguel. I'm not sure how old he is, but I'd estimate about 13. And the film takes place on Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. For those of us who are unfamiliar with Dia de los Muertos, Miguel and his grandma explain how they celebrate their dead relatives and the beliefs behind the holiday. Mexicans believe that on the Day of the Dead and the other associated days, people who have died can pass over to the land of the living to be reunited with their family. They need a bit of help in this though, and this is where the importance of putting photos of them up on the ofrenda, which is an altar with their favourite food, etc. as offerings, comes into play. Without the photos and the offerings, they can't be reunited with their family. Miguel loves his family. There's just one problem. He also loves music. It's his passion in life and is the source of much joy for him. And this is a problem because his family has a total ban on music. We see his grandma extending this ban to someone playing an instrument outside their front door even. None of the families speak of music unless it's to enforce this ban. And the reason for such a severe anti-music stance reaches back to the days of Miguel's great-great-grandma, Mama Imelda, and how Miguel's great-great-granddad left to play music on tour but never came back. Mama Imelda had to look after their young daughter, Coco, who we get introduced to as Mama Coco, all on her own. From that moment on, music was forbidden in the family, and each generation has maintained this. Until we get to Miguel, at least. Miguel desperately wants to be able to play his guitar with the support of his family, and he doesn't want to have to suppress this part of himself that loves music. I think all of the viewers of this film can appreciate how difficult the abandonment Mama Imelda and young Mama Coco went through is. It's also easy to see how the blame for their situation landed on music as a whole. I want to dig a bit deeper here though. Mama Imelda definitely experienced a re-experiencing of this abandonment when faced with reminders of it. And she avoided these reminders to an extreme degree through enacting the ban on talking about music or playing musical instruments, removing her husband's photo from the ofrenda, a very significant and substantial measure to take in my opinion, and refusing to speak of him. She carried overwhelming feelings connected to the abandonment and lost interest in something that she previously enjoyed after it. We can infer that she was always on guard, aka hypervigilant, against exposure to these reminders because of the effort put into avoiding them. Her hypervigilance also shows itself in guarding against this abandonment happening again by banning music. I'm comfortable in saying that Mama Imelda displayed multiple signs of post-traumatic stress disorder. And before I go on, this is all just my perception of her experience based on the diagnostic criteria for PTSD, what we get shown in the film, and my limited knowledge of her culture. For all I know, it may be standard to remove photos from an offender after a significant falling out. If someone knows about this, then please do let me know if this is a standard reaction to a major falling out. I am confident about the rest, however. And regardless of whether she would or wouldn't qualify as suffering from PTSD, as our medical model of health and illness defines it, she definitely experienced the abandonment as traumatic. So traumatic that she actually disowned the traumatized parts of her. Her way of getting through it was to find a new focus in looking after Coco and building a business in order to provide for her daughter. The film Coco doesn't hold this trauma as its main focus, though. Mama Imelda's unprocessed feelings and disowned traumatized parts were still very present throughout her life, and Mama Coco inherited them, alongside her own trauma connected to the loss of her father. Mama Coco also disowned these unprocessed feelings, so her daughter, Abuelita, inherited them. It went on like this down the generations, and it's a perfect example of how transgenerational trauma occurs and plays out. We know this is what happened in Miguel's family by looking at the way Abuelita and Miguel's mum and dad interact with each other, with him, and with others. Abuelita is shown to be flying into the trauma-responsive fight when exposed to mentions of music or people playing music. This looks like her shouting at them, breaking instruments, slamming doors, not being open to discussion, and issuing ultimatums. It's very much her way or the highway. All of this is clearly designed to protect her from the threat posed by music, and she is eloquent enough to be able to explain how music is an evil force which sows discord and breaks up families. She's not able to critically think about the impact of forbidding her grandson from expressing himself in this authoritarian way, though, and that's because in order to do so, she would be required to start processing some of that transgenerational trauma, which is likely just as big, heavy, and scary as when the original trauma occurred. The family as a whole can be seen engaging in some of these behaviours as a collective, and this is most prominent with the forceful, aggressive attitude they adopt when Miguel's passion for music becomes evident. His mum and dad seem to exhibit the fawn trauma response of people-pleasing, which involves giving in to others, going along to get along, and avoiding conflict. They are there, but they don't stick their heads above the parapet, and even when it becomes clear that their son is being targeted for his musical interest, they avoid the conflict and encourage him to do the same. I would like to take a moment here to look at trauma responses in general. There are 6 of them: fight, flight, freeze, flop, fawn, and urgency. The fight trauma response is demonstrated for us in Coco through the Abuelita character, but it can also show up in the following ways: shaming, mocking, insulting, and taunting others or ourselves, as well as talking back to figures of authority. The flight trauma response is one where we feel anxious and fearful, where we want to get as far away from whatever is threatening us or stressing us out. This can be a very physical way getting away from, e.g. leaving and avoiding the situation where you felt unsafe and anxious. Or it can be more of a mental process, where the thing you're trying to get away from are distressing thoughts, feelings, and even memories. If you are keeping busy, always on the go, and/or are looking to always have things to do because it helps you not feel uncomfortable, anxious, or panicked, then you're likely in a flight response. This response can also have people throwing themselves into things like work and micromanaging people and situations. Fight and flight are both governed by the sympathetic nervous system. This means that they are both marked by a faster and stronger heartbeat, faster breathing, a greater availability of energy, muscles primed for action, and a slowing or stopping of the digestive system. The freeze response still has the energy that fight and flight are characterized by, but here we are beginning to see the influence of the immobilization that our dorsal vagal pathway brings. It can manifest as giving up quickly, an inability to make decisions, getting confused over what's actually happening, being unable to get started with things, and instead spending hours watching TV or scrolling through social media, shutting down and withdrawing. The dorsal vagal immobilization is in full effect with the flop trauma response. Here we see some of the same things as freeze, minus the energy that the sympathetic states bring. So there's withdrawing from people, shutting down, binge watching, endless social media scrolling, an inability to make decisions, giving up quickly, and confusion over what is really happening. There's also likely to be a physical collapse, inability to move or speak, complete emotional numbing, other forms of dissociation, and/or disengaging from people and other things in life. It's been likened to a feigned death that humans and animals both can go into when they're unable to escape danger. All of these trauma responses can be seen in other species in the natural world, not just humans. Then we come to fawn. This trauma response has some of the energy from both the sympathetic nervous system and from the dorsal vagal pathway, blended with the energy from the ventral vagal pathway, which is activated when we feel safe enough. It has this blend because we've identified a threat which we can't fight, get away from, freeze, or flop in response to. When we engage in the fawn trauma response, it's because we have learned that we need to soothe the source of the threat if we are to survive and feel safe enough again. This is where we engage in people-pleasing behaviours, which put other people's needs and feelings as being more important than our own. This is exactly what Miguel's mum and dad tried to get him to do in the film. They tried to get him to soothe the source of the threat by suppressing his love for music, because that will stop the conflict and make other family members happy. The fawn response teaches us that our feelings and needs don't matter, that saying no and speaking up for ourselves is wrong, that conflict is dangerous, and that letting other people make the decisions and set the agenda means that they will be happy without any potential for scary conflict. And finally, we have come to urgency. This is not widely spoken about, but it is most definitely a trauma response. As the name indicates, this response is based in the attitude that everything needs to be done right now. It's a totally understandable thing to experience because in a traumatic emergency moment, there often isn't time to think, and we do need to act very quickly. Sometimes this sense of agency can last beyond the end of the event and can be triggered even years down the line. Living with trauma is difficult, and we don't always get the help we might need to heal quickly. So we can end up disowning parts of ourselves which carry the trauma and the feelings associated with it. This process basically involves labeling a part of ourselves as undesirable and pushing it away. Creating that distance between ourselves and the part of ourselves which is hurting and exhibiting trauma responses means that we can carry on as normal while our trauma just sits in a dark corner of our psyche. And as we see in Coco, the impact of the trauma isn't contained when we do this. It affects us. We just choose to stay blind to it. And it affects those around us, including our family. This is how insidious unprocessed trauma can be. Coco also helps highlight how the trauma responses work together to maintain the suppression of the disowned, unprocessed feelings. People have been talking about the transgenerational trauma representation in Encanto, seemingly without stopping to consider how Coco has addressed this topic too. This is possibly because Encanto has been a big hit, with the incredibly catchy songs, or because its depiction of trauma was simpler. In Encanto, Abuela goes through the trauma of losing her husband after being displaced during a conflict, and the magic candle is the symbol and provider of safety. She works hard to maintain the safety they have through control, even if it means trying to silence her kids or grandkids, or disowning them entirely. With Coco, we have a richer picture of the impact that interpersonal and transgenerational trauma can have. For this reason, I think Coco has a bigger place in my heart. Even if I do regularly listen to Isabella's song, What Else Can I Do? We're not done there though, because it gets better yet. Miguel is determined to play his guitar in the Dia de los Muertos talent show, but his guitar is broken in the conflict with his family. He has convinced himself from a faceless photo of Mama Imelda, Mama Coco, and his great-great-granddad that this really famous singer, Ernesto de la Cruz, is his estranged relative. So he breaks into de la Cruz's resting place and borrows his guitar. Stealing from a dead person on the Day of the Dead is severe enough that Miguel finds himself removed from the land of the living. He now cannot interact with anyone who is still alive, apart from his dog, but can now see and interact those who have died. He meets some of his relatives, including Mama Imelda, who immediately resolve to help him get back to the land of the living. He requires a blood relative's blessing to go back to the land of the living, but none of them will do so and allow him to play music. Miguel sets off to find Ernesto de la Cruz, believing that he will give Miguel his blessing. I won't go into all the ins and outs of Miguel's quest to get back to his life. This context that I've covered was important for what I want to go on to next. So, you remember all of that transgenerational trauma that Miguel's family has? With his time spent in the land of the dead, Miguel proves himself to be something of a catalyst for processing it. He rides lots of emotional waves throughout the film, and he generally handles them well, to be honest. He feels his feelings, has supportive of people around him, even if there are also unsupportive ones too. And on his journey, Miguel connects with Mama Imelda through music, an incredibly vulnerable moment for her. He also discovers that he was wrong about being related to De La Cruz, finds out who his great-great-granddad really is, and also why he never returned to Mama Imelda and Mama Coco. In possession of this knowledge, and because he had listened to the hurt feelings on all sides, he was able to reunite the family in the land of the dead. They give him their blessing to go back to the land of the living, and this time it's without any restrictions concerning music. Once back in the land of the living, Miguel is able to connect with Mama Coco through music as well, and the ripple effects of his actions help the family as a whole. The whole film is a depiction of trauma and transgenerational trauma, including the impact a compassionate, healing figure can have on the family system as a whole. I love it, truly love it. Coco captures the emotions wonderfully and takes the whole family on a thoroughly enjoyable and affirming journey. One of the best things about this, in my opinion, is that Miguel doesn't reunite his relatives and act as a catalyst for the healing process by couching it in terms of, I'm a kid, this is hurting me, and resolving this would be better for me, even if that's how he actually started off. Over the course of the film, he shows the emotional intelligence to sit back, properly listen to others' pain, and invest the effort into helping them ease their pain simply because they're hurting. Well, that and because they're family. He does benefit from the healing of those rifts and of the trauma, but that isn't his motivation at the end, and that in itself is very special. We tend to think of trauma as the thing that happens to us, but it's actually what happens within us as a response to what's happened to us. Trauma is the injury inside, and when this happens within a relationship of any sort between people, Part of the injury is an interpersonal disconnection. Because the damage is being done in the context of interpersonal relationships, the healing needs to be done in the same context. We cannot heal this kind of wound on our own. We need compassionate, loving, reliable, and dependable people. We need people who can show us that we are safe enough with them. This is why therapy is so often highlighted as necessary for people who are traumatized. Self-work can only get you so far with this. Healing communities and working with people like me can be very helpful along the healing journey. Obviously, Coco glosses over and simplifies some of this in order to deliver that entertaining and satisfying story. It isn't quite as simple as the film portrays, but they do show the importance of things such as listening to rather than dismissing the feelings of traumatized people, which is so valuable. Thank you for listening to this episode on Disney Pixar's Coco. I hope that you've got something from it, and I would love to hear your comments, so please do drop me a message. If you have any film requests for me to cover in a similar way, let me know and I will definitely check it out. And until next time, take it easy.